Karen Red, Episode 4 From Discovery Dump to Mistrial. Part 4 of our ongoing docuseries on the Karen Read case. All individuals are presumed innocent. Many details are disputed. What follows reflects court filings, testimony, and reporting from the first trial. Cold open. The first Karen Read trial had everything. A late federal discovery dump, a judge drawing hard lines on what could be said in openings, defense attacks on a state trooper's text messages, a controversy over inverted video, and, after weeks of testimony, a mistrial that turned on confusing verdict forms. Tonight we go inside the courtroom, not the hashtags, not the rallies, the rulings, arguments, evidence fights, and the moment a case this big came down to process. Previously, on this series. In episodes 1 and 2, we followed the night Boston police officer John O'Keefe died, the charges against Karen Read, and the pretrial battles, disputes over phone data, taillight fragments, autopsy interpretation, and claims of a cover-up. In episode 3, we tracked the rise of blogger Aidan Turtleboy Kearney, whose reporting helped shape public opinion, while drawing its own legal fire. Now, episode 4, the first trial, what the jury actually heard, what they didn't, and why it ended the way it did. Chapter 1. Trial by Media versus Trial by Rules. By the time jurors were being summoned, the court had already tackled a central problem, how to keep a fair trial, when the internet had been trying the case for 2 years. Prosecutors asked the judge to restrict extrajudicial statements, arguing defense commentary was prejudicing the jury pool. The defense pushed back, saying the Commonwealth wanted to muzzle criticism, while selectively presenting its own narrative. The judge's message before openings was clear. The trial would be run by the rules of evidence, not the rules of social media. That theme, what the jury may consider, versus what the public debates, will run through everything you're about to hear. Chapter 2, The Federal Shadow and the Tidal Wave of Discovery. Just as the March start date approached, a new headline hit. Thousands of pages of federal discovery were disclosed to the parties. The defense called it a tidal wave of new, potentially exculpatory material. Prosecutors said it was largely cumulative and consistent with their theory. Whatever you call it, the effect was concrete. The judge postponed the start to give both sides time. The delay added drama and raised a question true crime fans love to argue. When late discovery lands, is it a bombshell or noise? The trial would soon test that. Legal 101, brief. Discovery is the exchange of case materials. Late disclosure can trigger delays. Only some late material changes outcomes. The jury never hears discovery fights, only the evidence that makes it past the gate. Chapter 3. The Opening Statement Chessboard. When openings finally began, the judge placed a critical constraint. The defense could pursue a third-party culprit theory later, if they laid a proper evidentiary foundation, but not in opening statements. Why? Openings must preview admissible proof, not speculation. Prosecution's theme. After a night of drinking, Read reversed and struck O'Keefe near 34 Fairview Road. Broken taillight fragments and other forensic elements would align with that. They pointed to statements attributed to Read in the frantic early hours, lines like "I hit him," which the defense says were misconstrued, panicked, or ripped from context. Defense's theme. Bias and tunnel vision from investigators, gaps in collection and documentation, and an under-scrutinized house where other events could have occurred. The defense promised to test the evidence, the timelines, and the credibility of key investigators. Legal 101, brief. Third-party culprit is permitted if you connect specific facts to a specific person and a specific act. It's not a vibe, it's a rule-driven pathway that must be opened with admissible proof. Chapter 4. The Trooper Proctor Texts, Credibility on Trial. Early and often, the defense spotlighted Trooper Michael Proctor's text messages. Private communications laced with crude language about Read, including statements the defense argued showed animus and investigative bias. They highlighted messages about searching a phone for intimate images, and messages expressing hope that something terrible would happen to the defendant. Prosecutors countered that while the language was offensive and unprofessional, the evidence collection and testing were performed by multiple units and labs, insulated from one trooper's words. They emphasized that offensive texts are not, by themselves, proof that physical evidence was fabricated, or findings are false. For the jury, this became a credibility referendum. Can you trust a case when a central investigator writes like that? Or do you isolate the behavior from the broader forensic record? Viewers debated it all over social media. The jurors had to live with the legal standard inside the courtroom. Chapter 5. Evidence flashpoints the jury weighed. A. Timeline and statements. Prosecutors argued a window around the drop-off and three-point turn. The defense emphasized chaotic early morning statements and memory gaps typical of emergency scenes, arguing those words were not reliable admissions. The jury had to decide whether phrases like "I hit him" reflected confession, shock, or something in between. B. Taillight and scene processing. The state pointed to red plastic consistent with Reed's SUV and its broken taillight. The defense drilled chain of custody, scene control, and collection methods, arguing that documentation gaps and evolving recovery of fragments diminished confidence. The jury's task: does the physical linkage outweigh the questions about how, when, and by whom items were found? C. Injuries and mechanism. The prosecution said injuries fit a vehicle impact in winter conditions. The defense probed alternative explanations: blunt trauma patterns, arm and facial findings, hypothermia dynamics, and how a dog at the residence, since rehomed, had been discussed in pre-trial litigation, but largely fenced out at trial absent a proper evidentiary foundation. The judge kept the focus on what could be supported by admissible medical and forensic testimony. D. Digital evidence. Phone data and movement artifacts generated competing narratives. Prosecutors emphasized timelines and travel. The defense cautioned that data artifacts are noisy and sensitive to interpretation. Jurors heard versions, not blog threads, and had to decide credibility witness by witness. Chapter 6. The inverted video controversy. One of the most viral public debates turned on a simple but powerful idea: direction. A piece of video became the center of a fight over whether jurors, and the public, were seeing a mirrored or inverted view. To most people, flipped video sounds like a YouTube editing mistake. In a courtroom, it can alter how a lay viewer perceives left versus right, approach versus departure, and positional relationships. The defense pressed the issue hard, aiming to suggest that the state's narrative leaned on a misleading representation. The prosecution maintained that the content and metadata were accurately described, and that any mirroring didn't change the core facts they were relying on. The judge's ruling steered jurors toward the underlying substance, but for many viewers, this became an emblem. If something as basic as which side is which was in dispute, what else could be? Legal 101. Brief. Authenticity is about what the video is. Relevance is about what it shows. If orientation is wrong or confusing, a court can allow clarifying testimony, but jurors still decide what weight to give it. Chapter 7. Inside the jury room. Verdict forms and a mistrial. After all the testimony, the case went to the jury. Then came the moment that defined the first trial: verdict forms that some jurors found confusing. What options belong on which count? What sequence? What do these legal terms mean when they're side by side? The details matter. Jury forms are the last mile of justice. A small drafting choice can cascade into big consequences. As questions and readbacks unfolded, the judge worked to keep the instructions consistent with law and precedent. Yet, the result we all know: a mistrial, a hung jury that never reached unanimous verdicts. Supporters of the prosecution argued the forms were standard and fair. Defense supporters argued more clarity could have prevented deadlock. Both sides agreed on one thing: after a marathon, process took center stage. Legal 101. Brief. A mistrial because of a hung jury means no verdict, no conviction, no acquittal. The case can be retried. Chapter 8. What the jury never decides, but viewers do. Outside the courthouse, people debated everything the jury never rules on: press conferences, rallies, online theories, and federal investigation headlines. Inside, the jurors were boxed in by the evidence admitted, the instructions given, and the forms they had to sign. This trial became a civics lesson. Courtroom truth is narrower than internet truth. A clean conviction requires credible proof beyond a reasonable doubt. A clean acquittal requires unanimous doubt. Everything else, confusion, contradiction, credibility fights, pushes a jury towards stalemate. Chapter 9. Where the case stands after the mistrial. For John O'Keefe's family, the mistrial meant more waiting for answers. For Karen Reed, it meant no resolution, neither vindication nor conviction. For investigators and attorneys, it meant a second trial would have to fix the first trial's pain points: tighter framing of key evidence, clearer exhibits, and verdict forms that leave less space for ambiguity. And hovering over everything, the federal shadow remained a narrative force, even when it wasn't evidence in the courtroom. If Episode 2 showed how pretrial litigation rewrote the map, Episode 4 showed how process can steer the verdict as much as proof. Closing. Setting the stage for Episode 5. In Episode 5 we'll look at what changes heading into a retrial. Will the court draw different lines on third-party culprit evidence? How will both sides address the Proctor text controversy and credibility issues? Will the inverted video dispute be presented with clearer orientation or demonstratives? And will revised jury instructions and verdict forms keep the focus where it belongs, on the facts the jury is allowed to consider? This case isn't just about what happened on a snowy night. It's about how we decide what happened, what counts as proof, how bias is tested, and whether a jury can find certainty when the story keeps evolving. If you've been with us since Episode 1, you know this isn't just a courtroom drama, it's a test of the system itself. Subscribe for Episode 5, where the stakes get even higher, a second chance at clarity, or a second act of